Doge termination. So it's been an interesting year, but we're figuring things out. And I got some FaceTime with Anthony yesterday. We spent a couple hours
That's good.
yesterday in East Lyme with former Senate leader-ish Paul Formica.
Ish. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the hi? It's Anthony. Good morning. The other Anthony.
Oh, the other Anthony.
The
Wait,
other
is Anthony on the call?
Anthony's not here. Anthony C is here.
Anthony C. How are you?
Well, I'm gone by that since elementary school. I'm well. So what I'm sort of tell me a little bit what is going on in your world? What's the, if you don't mind, if it's not too
Yeah, no, not at all.
painful.
We're waiting for other people, I assume.
Yeah, folks are running a little late, it looks like.
Yeah, so Anthony, we on April 2nd, we received 4 termination notices from the National Endowment for the Humanities for our operating support grants, as did every other humanities council across the country, which sort of sent everybody into a giant tailspin because it is our principal form of operating support. And so, we have now, as a collection of humanities councils across the country, have filed suit for an injunction against Doge and NEH. And so that's underway now. We're not quite sure where anything has landed in the big beautiful bill. President Trump provided in his budget, I can't remember, it's $38 or $40 million to essentially close the agency, which is enough to just sort of dismantle everything. Whether or not that goes into play, we just don't know yet. We have historically had bipartisan support in Congress. And so we hope that continues. We hope that there's a fight. They have in the past, he has proposed these cuts in term 1, and Congress came back rebuffing that and actually increasing the allocations for the national endowments. I just don't know what that's looking like these days, and that's yet to be seen in terms of how the Interior bill settles out. So that's kind of it in a nutshell on the federal level. On the state level, we saw our first line item increase in 15 years or so. Wasn't a huge bump, but it certainly helps.
Yes.
We'll continue to sort of advocate on behalf of the cultural sector, because I think given the cuts from NEH, NEA, and IMLS, there's roughly $7.5 million or so that are no longer coming into the state from the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
And so there will be sort of a funding collapse in Connecticut and across the country. So we're trying to figure stuff out. That's my nutshell.
Right. But in the meantime, from a staff perspective and your day to day, 9 to 5, what does that look like?
We're continuing along with a provisional budget that keeps our staff level flat for the moment, but we are dipping into our rainy day fund at CTH.
I see. Okay.
And so once we know a little bit more, hopefully at the end of summer, we'll have to make some decisions, either figuring out more revenue or addressing things through different kinds of expense cuts.
And in the context of the state budget, was there money? I remember, I think from last year, there's a continuation of the state budget, right? And without any appropriation to CT 250, is that still the case in the current budget?
In the current budget, I just found out a couple of days ago that the 250th work will receive $100,000 a year in both years of the biennium. So that's basically it.
Yeah.
And unless until and unless the governor puts any kind of funding on a bond agenda. We know there's about 20 to $22 million sort of that's been authorized by the legislature, but it's really up to the governor to put on his bond agenda and seek authorization.
20 to $22 million in total for the effort, or for the entirety of the state bonding?
No, not for the entirety of state bonding. It's more cultural funding, good to great grants. I think last session, the legislature authorized, I think 10 million of that, 22 or so million. We had oriented around the 250th, but I think folks are just uncomfortable with that. So I think it's more committed to good to great with a 250th lens kind of thing.
And with well, that's helpful. Does the what do you see from a national level as kind of America 250 is increasingly politicized and sort of turned into, a thing? Are there is it are you finding that states who disagree with the federal policy are withdrawing, or are they sort of doubling down on their own expression of what it means to celebrate or sort of commemorate this moment in time?
I would say in meetings with other state commissions, it's been more of the latter. I think no one is really retreating, and we are in monthly calls with the National Commission and the White House Task Force. And those, although the relationship between the states and the federal government has shifted a little bit, I think largely the National Commission and the national efforts are very much saying we are not looking to impact what individual states are doing and are largely hands-off towards us. And individual states are just saying we are doing this our way and we'll choose to either participate in national endeavors or not, depending on what they are and how they align with what states are hoping out of this.
Yeah.
Got it. But given, let's call it federal support for America 250, or enthusiasm, executive enthusiasm, there isn't suddenly a windfall of cash that was included in this.
Well, that's different. Rob can fill you in on that.
Yeah.
So the big beautiful bill includes 150 million for America 250, and we have a set of lobbyists that we work with, and they were able to find that the 150 will go to the Department of the Interior. And so one of the things that I've done the past 2 years with the American Association for State and Local History is circulated a letter in Congress to support federal funding for America 250. This past year, we had 76 members of the House and Senate, Republican and Democrat, sign on to the letter. One of the individuals who was a primary signator is Senator Kramer from North Dakota. He's a Republican. And one of the things I've asked our lobbyists to do is to reach out to his chief of staff, because Burgum is the former governor of North Dakota and now the Secretary of the Interior. So Kramer, his staff knows the Secretary of Interior pretty well. And what we've done is we've teed up the possibility, we've identified all 56 commissions in the states and in territories, and provided that chief of staff with those addresses and with a pitch to have some or all of the 150 million that's in the big beautiful bill go to state commissions. When the letter was circulated, we advocated that it go to either the IMLS or state commissions. And obviously, with the current environment that Jason's describing, we've pivoted away from IMLS and leaned heavily into getting the money out of the hands of Washington and getting it into communities across the country. And so he loved the idea. They're pitching it to the Department of the Secretary of the Interior staff, and this just happened last week. So it's pretty fresh right now, but and I recognize it's a Hail Mary. There's no doubt about it. But with the connection with Kramer and with Secretary of Interior, there's a little bit of hope. There's a chance that it might help them to distribute those funds. There's a lot of, I'm involved with conversations with people across the country, and there's a lot of organizations that are real concerned about, this becoming a worldwide wrestling event extravaganza across the country. And what I'm trying to do, and what we're working with ASLH, is to try to get funds in the hands of these state commissions so that each state can choose how to celebrate. My personal feeling is there's plenty of room for fireworks, parades, mom apple pie, and programs with content. And so I'm hopeful that we will be able to maybe, get our hands in the cookie jar here and get some funds to the commissions like the Connecticut 250 Commission and other commissions around the country. But again, they could just decide, the White House could decide that they're going to spend all that money. I mean, they spent 40 million on just that crazy parade that they had. So
Who makes the decision and when? How does that decision happen and when does it happen?
So we're waiting to hear back. We fed all this information to Kramer's chief of staff, and we're sitting tight and waiting to hear back from him. So today's Thursday, it all went to him on Tuesday. And so hopefully we'll hear by next week what they've decided to do. And, we're trying to help them solve a problem. And if they have $150 million that they have dedicated to America 250, and some or all of it could go in this direction, it could be helpful. You should note, and Jason and Cindy know this better than I, but the America 250 Commission has really reduced its footprint, quite considerably. For a while, they were talking about 8 national events, and now I think it's down to just a handful. They were originally appointed during the first Trump administration and kind of stumbled coming out of the gate. They've spent about $54 million over the last 8 years, and quite frankly, don't have a lot to show for it. So there's, I think, the potential for more grassroots efforts, and I think that appeals to some members of Congress, that we would be distributing these funds across the country. So I think we just have to continue to apply the appropriate amount of pressure with this chief of staff, and he's got to get his boss to agree. And then the other step that we're prepared to take is AASLH has identified 1,400 organizations that are in the districts of the Republicans that signed on to that letter. And so if they're going to move in this particular direction, we could pull the trigger for some advocacy from those groups with their individual congressional delegations to put some pressure on the Secretary of the Interior to distribute the monies in this way.
Stay tuned for UFC 250 Hartford.
Exciting stuff.
Yeah. I didn't catch that, Jason.
Stay tuned for UFC 250 Hartford.
Sorry, that was pretty
Just
good.
From a tourism perspective, I think it's gold. I mean, you know what? It's like, come to America. It's what you always thought it was. It's like it's great. I mean, we're in Canada at the moment, and which is which is fine. Actually, the Eastern Townships has a great campaign. I don't know if you've seen it. It's an American or it's a man who walks up to a hotel registration desk and he sort of quietly says, she addresses him in French, and he says, "I don't speak French. I speak English." And I'm he whispers, "I'm American." It's she is seen to press a red button under the front desk and the red button releases the lock on the countertop, and so she can open the flap, and she comes around and she gives him a great big hug. She said,
Aw.
and then the slogan is "Let's hug it out." You know, but it's no, but it is remarkable. I mean, this is a pointed question. There's obviously limited time. I think you guys have always been very clear that even the time we did have was not enough to achieve our goals. Does what in your mind is kind of a drop dead date, for lack of a better term, on I know you don't, nobody wants to stop, right? But
Yeah, I think
there's
at
a
this
reasonable amount of
point,
time, right, in which you can deploy those funds, use those funds, capitalize on them, and use them in a useful way.
I mean, there is and there isn't. I think regardless of when we get funds, the plan is to use them in a way that advances arts, humanities, tourism, to kind of get the sector to the next phase, even if, God forbid, we get money in the next fiscal year starting July 1st. Is it ideal? No. But will we do something with it that helps the sector as a whole? Yes. So I think that's where we are right now. Whenever we get funding, if we get funding, we'll do the best we can with it at the time that we receive it. In an ideal world, sooner is better than later, in order to make, in particular, I think July 4th, 2026, as big of a event as possible for the state.
Can I just add, or at least offer this thought? We have been funding over the last year and a half, 2 years, a number of projects relating to the 250th. When we just made another set of awards, maybe $250,000 or so. A number of those awards also went to organizations thinking about the 250th. And so we're sort of painting a landscape of content that isn't quite online right now, but will be in the coming months. So despite the seeming lack of investment, we have been doing it. And I think, in the neighborhood of $2.5 million over the last couple of years, between good to great grants, which are more capital improvements for organizations looking to do things related. But then all the project-based grants for exhibits and programs and things like that. So those are here. I think what we're struggling with in this particular moment is tying all of them together into orientation that makes sense for the broader public in Connecticut, and for those people who want to visit us during this time and learn a little bit more about Connecticut's 250th history, our orientation to nationhood. And so that's what I think that's the phase we're in. I mean, if we get more money for projects, great. Anthony, I think to your point, time is diminishing. As we head to the 250th anniversary. Although I would add, there are a whole lot of anniversaries that are subsequent to that.
Right.
8 years of American Revolution and formation of nationhood and so on. So we can think about it that way, but to take advantage of this moment and the particular anniversary when everybody's thinking about it, the way in which we can tie it all together, I think, is really, really what we're after at the moment. And I don't know if you want to talk about.
I can speak a little bit on that. That's the part that doesn't scare me as much, because for no money, we've already built a section of CT Visit for CT 250. CT Visit can serve as that. It can host all of the different events. It can have content that talks about whatever you want, whatever stories you want to tell can live there, and they can all be under the banner of CT 250. And it can be a place where we point and drive traffic around the CT 250. It already exists. The technology is already set up. All it's missing is the content. So, I feel like at least part of that problem can be solved with no money. It's just the energy and effort to put the content in.
Yeah, and I think I'm gonna say we can officially kind of call the meeting to order and start hitting on the agenda. I feel like we've been kind of doing updates for a while. But we wanted to have, I'm gonna turn the agenda around, and given your comments, Felicia, start with CT visit. I think that's an excellent point, and that was one of the things we were hoping to touch on today. The state and Adams and Knight have developed this page that gives us an opportunity to really center America 250 within some of the state's tourism and marketing for the next year, however long we feel like that story is relevant for people.
Yeah, let me, if you don't, if this is the right time, I can describe it a little more because it's bigger than a page. It's a site within a site. So it is the functionality of CT Visit, but under a Connecticut 250 theme. So it would have events and content and listings. So when the listings exist, they basically just get tagged to CT 250. That will then make them show up in this section as well as in the run of site with CT Visit, meaning that the however many millions of people are visiting CT Visit will have access to it. And if there is by miracle some marketing budget that is promoting CT 250 and mentions the URL for the CT 250 section of the site, can drive straight to the front door of everything CT 250 all wrapped up with a bow, but it would have content and listings and events and have basically the functionality of CT Visit. And it exists now, it's just not populated, so it's not showing. But so richer, much more robust than a page. It's an experience, it's a site.
Right.
And so related to that, there are sponsorship opportunities for CT Visit that we have gotten okayed through the State Office of Ethics, and we're ready to move forward. Anthony, who should be joining us in a few minutes, is working on a press release to advertise this more broadly, and we're hoping to launch that press release at the end of July after a couple of vacations, so that we are able to use kind of some of the publicity that the 250th has received in the last few weeks to kind of take this to the next level. The hope is that if we can get sponsorships for this CT Visit 250th site, we can use that funding to really promote the 250th within the state of Connecticut. I think sponsorship opportunities begin at 15,000 and go up to about 100,000. The lower level sponsorship opportunities are more targeted articles and content driven sponsors benefits, while the larger, the 100,000 is a really huge branding opportunity for anybody involved in Connecticut tourism. So I think that is a huge opportunity that we need to figure out how to capitalize on. In addition to that, I think we are hoping to possibly have some volunteers, which is why we wanted to talk about this with the group, to help create copy for that page. I think we've been slow to really get to that point, but are hoping to create some exciting tourism copy around the opportunities of the 250th so that we can go live with this page, with this, I'll call it a mini site, and really start to promote that and get it out to the public. So happy to answer any questions, take any ideas for potential sponsors who might be interested in that added visibility on CT Visit, and take any volunteers who are excited about the opportunity to help create some copy.
By copy, I'm imagining you're meaning like writing content pieces.
Right, yeah.
Perfect.
And I
Hey,
think, go for it, Rob.
I was just, I know the Delamar just opened a new property in Mystic. I think they might be, the Mallory family might be a candidate for sponsor.
I know Charlie.
Oh, that might be good to check in with you on that, Anthony.
Yeah, he also has Lime Rock now.
Okay.
He owns on Lime Rock.
Who does? Who owns Lime Rock?
Charles Mallory. It's Delamar.
So Delamar owns Lime Rock?
Well, they have common ownership.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah, he bought that from Skip Barber.
Very interesting.
I'm sort of reluctant to volunteer staff on our side at the moment, but let me have a chat. And I'm only reluctant because we're still sort of scrambling to get, legs underneath Belden House. We've got a pretty robust sales and marketing team, which we call our, culture and commerce team, that we produce a lot of content on our site. And I know let me have a chat with some folks and see how we can maybe be useful, at least providing content on our region and our area. If the Belden website has has a lot actually. Which we did and developed in conjunction with, in partnership with the Litchfield Historical Society, the Oliver Walcott Library, and some other local partners. And that was a collaborative effort. So frankly, there may just be content that you can take that represents Litchfield kind of with an eye to attracting visitors. Now that Litchfield is a hospitality hotbed, with all of its new hotels.
Great.
But we have very much a regional perspective, and I wonder actually if that we've got I think we've got a sort of a standout historical society. I'm not sure if there are others in the state that are I'm sure there are, as well organized. But it seems to me they may be a source of some very good content. As well, we try not to write our content in a way that says, come have breakfast, and more so about, come visit this place and, hopefully you'll choose us. So I'm not sure about the other hotel groups. This Waterford might be Waterford Group is pretty major owner of hotel keys in Connecticut, and so is HEI. Those are two groups we could talk to, who we have relationships with.
Sounds great. And if it's content related, we have relationships and have funded a lot of the historical societies doing content. So we could find a way of blending that maybe.
Yeah, it's getting the content and then making it appealing to, a larger population.
Yeah.
Jason, we've got, I got this directors group that meets quarterly. And so about, I don't know, there are 25 in the group now, and they're going to be meeting at the end of July at the Wadsworth. Lamont's going to be there, so we'll have a little Q&A with him. But if there's a message about the 250th that you would like me to bring to that group, I'm happy to do that.
Other than put money towards it?
Content.
Do content too. Yes, I will give that more thought, Rob.
Yeah. Was there any thought about community foundations like HFPG with some of their donor advised funds? If there's anyone that has a particular interest in, this arena, there's also community foundations in other parts of the state. I'm sure you guys have already been, thinking about that, but that's just something else that I'd like to throw out there.
Yeah, we have been thinking about it, but it might be time to reframe our ask just around more of the donor advised funds and kind of, our initial ask was just a general invest more in arts, culture, humanities at a time when one of the biggest funders is disinvesting in the sector. But I think we have had a couple of conversations around the 250th with a couple of community foundations who have asked questions about why they're suddenly getting more requests in from kind of organizations across the state. And one of those is HFPG, and they expressed an interest in supporting the work. So we'll continue to have those.
Well, I wasn't there, but when Obama was at the in Hartford a couple weeks ago, evidently Jay Williams, he gave sort of a rousing introduction about leaning into diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I just think that telling whole history or telling all stories, you know, are some things to be thinking about with the 250th. And there might be some staff at the community foundations that could direct you to donor advised funds that might have a interest in it. And I think, you know, you're exactly right that this moment with lack of funding from the federal government with these sorts of things creates an opportunity. Well, we need to lean on individual philanthropy more than ever.
Yeah, I actually meant to mention that earlier, Rob. So yes, absolutely, we'll be pursuing that. But you know, the $150 million that is in the big beautiful bill may actually come with some conditions. As some of this cultural funding has, and it's largely oriented around anti-DEI, and that's something we simply won't comply with. So there may be consequences for that.
Yeah. A little off topic, but just so the whole group knows that there still is the National Endowment for the Humanities and National Endowment for the Arts. Their grant requirements stipulate that if you receive funding from those entities, you have to comply with current and future executive orders. And so there's a parenthetical phrase after that said they're not going to enforce that because of pending litigation. But I know of colleagues around the country that are running in the other direction and want nothing to do with putting pen to ink to paper to do a grant. But I don't know, Jason, just so you know where we are, we're pursuing NEH funds. We'll cross the bridge when we get to it, but I feel like that's something that the current administration wants to see happen, wants to see people running in the other direction. And we're just not quite ready to do that yet. So we're applying.
Yeah. Totally understand. We felt it a little bit more directly from NEH, so it's more tangible for us.
For sure. Yeah. I certainly get that. It just is challenging times.
Hey, Anthony.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good.
Sorry I am late.
No worries. So we've touched on CT Visit a bit. We've touched on just general funding for the 250th and for the commission for CTH, a little bit of all of the above. I think the next point on our conversation is to talk a little bit about the 250th trail. So we were, and I'll let actually you and Jason take the lead on talking about how the 250th trail conversation started with CT Port Authority and where we are. Which you guys were more involved in those conversations than me.
Well, Anthony and I had a conversation initially with Frank Burns and the Connecticut Port Authority about the sponsorship for the 250th trail. And we put together, this was a little bit of a backwards process where we had a conversation. The Port Authority board approved $250,000 sponsorship over 5 years. and then asked us for the proposal. So we put together a proposal that we had a conversation around, had input from Anthony, from the tourism folks, and felt like it was a pretty strong proposal. And then as we're sort of moving forward on it, we were asked to start doing a little bit more and different, which included video clips weekly, which we just don't have the capacity to do. And so I sent a note to the executive director of the Port Authority the other day, basically saying, you know, our last proposal was our best proposal, and we're unable to sort of undertake additional work related to that. We just don't have the internal capacity to do it. I haven't heard back yet. So that's kind of where we're at. So there's a possibility we're walking away from this, unfortunately.
Well, I think there's a possibility we're walking away from the funding, but I think we have been talking a bit about whether it's funded or not. This seems like a great opportunity
Yes.
to encourage tourism. We do have the ability to create this trail and add it to CT Visit and promote that, and have sites around the state also promote it. I know from our standpoint, we were hoping to have sites tied to the 4 themes of the commission, and then like a category that's a little more around restaurants and hotels. Because I think there needs to be a little of that, and there are lots of great historic restaurants and hotels here in the state, and encouraging that as part of a tourism trail makes a lot of sense. So I think what we are hoping for is, one, any ideas on sites that should be added to the trail, and then 2, any volunteers to help kind of review ideas that are submitted later in the summer, as we kind of take what we anticipate will be a pretty long list of places and ideas and get it down to something that is digestible for the public.
What's the core theme of the trail? What is the glue of the trail?
I think we haven't quite figured that out. I think we don't want it to just be Revolutionary War sites. We want it to be broader than that, but then it becomes hard to tie it all together. But I think this idea of sites of revolution or the 250th, I don't know, revolutions past and present. I don't know exactly what the best formulation is. I think that's going to need some massaging.
So, Cindy, I'll jump in there. Alicia, the answer to the question, I think, really depends upon who we want to fund this. Before, when we had the conversation with our friends at the Port Authority, we most certainly were willing to make it significantly more maritime focused than it was before. In this case, now that we're back to square one, my 2 cents, and this is what it's worth, at the end of the day, I don't really care what the theme is, because we could just market it and use it as a great tool, not just for tourism, but to have as evergreen content. But if we were able to use our 4 themes, it's really just anything historical that fit into those categories, and then we can denote them by the theme. So you could end up having a lot of different locations on there. In this case, though, it's like, if I had my druthers, I think it would all be related to what the core identity of Connecticut from a brand standpoint: makers, creators, innovators, and entrepreneurs. So if it fits into this commission's core themes, but also ties into that, can help us cull down what is likely to be hundreds and hundreds in the list. So, but consider that an opening salvo in a conversation.
I think that makes sense, Anthony. And we can find lots of ways to intersect with the themes of the commission on that.
Yeah, I have no doubt. I mean, if you talk about, creators, or makers. I mean, that's well broader, much broader than just manufacturing. We intentionally use those words in the brand of the state to fit all different types of stories we're trying to tell.
Yeah. Faking democracy.
Yeah.
And if these trails are not funded by anyone, if they're just, we have the opportunity to create them and promote them because we think they are something the consumer wants, we could have multiple trails. There could be one that's all about innovation, the innovation trail, and it could stick to one thing. We could have entrepreneurs trail, innovators trail, like we could have the revolutionary war trail, like those all seem very marketable.
100%. 100%. I would say, like, if we were able to do the different trails, but then have one big trail where they're all kind of come together.
Yeah, the Uber, the 4 pillars, and here's the Uber map for all of these ideas. This is the Connecticut. Yeah, it's very marketable.
Yeah, I mean, and you guys know, probably everybody on this call knows me well enough at this point. I have no problem saying to people who are not on the trail why they're not on the trail. So if we do this and do it right, ultimately, one, we have evergreen content for people who are historical travelers. They travel based upon wanting to engage in history and culture in that way. But then two, obviously we have an asset for 250th, and that is something, at least in my humble opinion, I think based upon the launch of this, whenever it goes out, the amount of impressions it's going to get, plus it's an asset that lives on CT Visit that's going to get a lot of impressions, and we can even advertise it. It's a win-win-win, and there's no reason why a brand would not want to sponsor that for a nominal fee. I think that's a well-worthy use of money.
What do you all see as a timeline for that? I mean, because we have a list of places that we could start building out and I'm sure the sites are already on CT Visit. Assembling them in a different way.
Yeah, so timeline, I think so at that point you could give us a list of hundreds and we could call it down. It takes a little bit of time, so we'd probably have one of our interns do the research and give us kind of that first pass. And then from there, it's actually assembling the articles on CT Visit and writing it. And then, we'll, with our very large budget, work with our friends at Adams and Knight to, I think this is worthy. One, usually we're trying to get away from creating these beautiful fancy graphics just because it's not sustainable. But for this, because it is evergreen, I'm more than willing to make that investment. And then we can go out and launch the thing and do a whole event and all of the above. So I think to answer your question, Jason, I'm sorry I'm talking out loud, everybody. I'm just trying to get to that answer.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a couple months. And plus of all the stuff that we and Adams and Knight have on their plate currently, I would probably shoot for early winter. If not, maybe going into the new year is probably a good timing perspective. But Felicia, tell me your thoughts.
I mean, if you guys were to put pressure on us to get a trail out quickly, we certainly could. But, if there isn't a pressure, beginning of the year sounds good.
So in the meantime, we can start assembling a list of what we think you should focus on and sort of aligning themes with
that would be great.
Sort of tourism angle.
That sounds great.
Yeah, I mean, really, Jason, I'm going to be deferential to you guys. I may make some, recommendations on tweaks here and there, but I really do want to rely on you guys because that's your ballywhack.
Yeah. Great.
One suggestion as you're thinking of the themes, I love the idea of using the themes that matter to us about branding the state, but I also love the themes that people will be looking for search engines because I'm super interested in organic search and especially these days AI search. So when people are looking for 250, if they are looking for Revolutionary War or things like that, like if you are using one that is themed around 250 or the birth of the nation or anything like that, those ideas will surface that trail more often. Based on how people are going to find it, because they're going to find it through organic search often.
Are you able to give us some of those keywords, knowing what people are looking for? And then we can sort of, if there's something that's not in our line of sight, we can at least say, oh, how about that site for
I can certainly get what I can now, but I bet we can guess them as we get closer to the birthday. What will people be looking for as they're feeling patriotic around, you know, this time as it starts to become nationally more prevalently marketed? Just what will be, you know, people looking for? They'll be looking for experiences that feel like birth of the nation. I don't know, 1776. Like they'll be looking for keywords that will be relevant.
Hopefully not birth of a nation, because that will yield some other things that we really don't want people to see.
Oh, this is so true.
We'll be careful. Yeah. And then I think what we'll do is we'll send around a form that people can share out with your networks and kind of collect ideas as we move forward. And we'll start promoting that as well to kind of our list and the people we've been communicating with the hope of creating kind of a inclusive list of locations that then we can kind of start to pare down. I think the hope is to pick as many locations that are accessible to the public as possible. This is, at the end of the day, about tourism, not about places that people can see but can't visit. So,
This is true.
yeah. So wonderful. We'll get that moving and keep it going forward and hopefully have a list to start promoting by the end of the year.
So on the trails, actually, there's have you ever come across the Pomeroy Foundation?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the historic marker folks.
Yeah.
We did one with them at Troutbeck, and we just recently did one with them in front of the Walcott House in Litchfield. Maybe there's something, maybe there's a sponsorship opportunity there, right? The mapping of you know, they can assist in mapping all of their markers.
Yeah, Rob, you have a relationship with them through the work Kate's doing.
Yep.
If I
Yes, we
recall,
do.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually I think it's an interesting idea. I mean, they are kind of I don't want to say stuck in their ways, but they're you know they're traditional in terms of what they give, but they might see sponsoring something with a trail in keeping with their sign efforts, but they might do something special for the 250th.
Well, I think it's also, though, I mean, to put a finer point on it, it's a marketing opportunity for them to deploy funds.
Yeah.
Because do you have another place that needs one of our traditional blue and gold markers? Right? Let us know here.
Yeah.
And also there's a map of all of our other ones.
They are also working currently with the Connecticut Freedom Trail as well to do markers for Freedom Trail sites around the state. I think they have an agreement to do maybe 10 or 12. So just a FYI, that's happening at the same time.
Yeah. It certainly doesn't preclude us from reaching out and checking in.
If we could get a clear statement on this, the other one is All Trails. So we also have a relationship with one of the board members at All Trails. So the apps that are trying to map, right, and develop this content for their users. I mean, you know, you could maybe approach Strava, some of the cycling apps, Map My Ride, because you have a lot of people who tour by bicycle, and it's a great state to cycle through. All Trails could be an interesting one since they're working very much. I know they've been working with the Park Service and others. So that's a connection we can make too, if you'd like. We could just sort of mediate and put them in touch with the right people on our side.
Yeah, that'd
Great
be
idea.
interesting. Are they branching out beyond just kind of hiking trails to other types of
It's
trails?
literally all trails. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's called All Trails. Yeah.
Interesting.
So
Like a good fit.
yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Great.
If you're in touch with Charlie, my wife is just, if you were to write her a note that said those two things had come up, because they've been involved as well with the symposium, she can make those connections as well.
Thanks, Anthony.
That actually wasn't me.
We have two
Other
Anthony.
Anthony.
C.
Okay, I was about to say.
We got AC and AA.
That's it.
This has been really helpful. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey guys, one thing I want to toss out there. Not that everything is always about money, but in this case it kind of is. If we really are trying to raise money for this, not only to cover our costs, but also to get a little bit extra dough in the coffers, we may want to think about doing this trail with a specific theme around creativity or innovation, because I think we're going to be significantly more likely to get corporate sponsorship from one of the many big companies in the state if there is that theme that ties into what their brand is. So like, for example, if you go with innovation, it's a very easy thing for us to walk into GE Appliances and say, hey, we're doing this whole trail. It's all about innovation. You guys are obviously doing that with your whole innovation center in Connecticut. Do you want to throw 50 or 100 grand at it? So just a little food for thought as you're thinking about it.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Well, the Anthonys are batting 1,000 at this meeting, huh?
Mhm.
It's all in the name.
All I did was volunteer my wife.
All right, we'll put some pen to paper on this and start getting some lists formed. And we'll send them off to all of you for comment.
Awesome.
And I'll just keep people posted to see if anything happens with
Yeah, good luck.
whatever happens. And you're right, Jason, there might be some strings attached that commissions aren't going to be comfortable with, but we'll see.
Yeah,
We'll see what
we'll see.
happens. So
Yeah. Yeah.
So Cindy, is this the part? Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, is this the part of the agenda where we do welcomes and introductions?
Because we've completely flip-flopped it.
Perhaps sharp.
I think we have all gotten to know each other by now. So
Yeah, no worries. Just teasing you.
Anthony, did you have something else to say? Anthony,
Oh, I was wondering.
on.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there was a if one of these trails is focused on indigenous populations, First Nations, and if so, I would assume there's kind of a natural sponsor there already
That'd be awesome.
represented on the commission.
Mhm.
There's a wonderful headstone, for example, in Kent for Eunice Maui.
Mhm.
They're interesting things here and there that, anyway. Fun one.
Okay.
that one I leave up to you.
It's definitely possible. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.